Welcome back, my students, to a brand new episode of Comic Class. In today's lesson, guys, we're going over the Amazing Spider-Man issue 41, The Horns of the Rhino. And yeah, this is the debut issue of the Rhino, one of Spider-Man's most famous Rogues Gallery villains. And yeah, this is going to be a pretty interesting read. So without further ado, let's jump right into today's story. Let's go. So this story basically starts off with Aunt May talking to Anna Watson, which is Mary Jane Watson's aunt. But her and Peter basically have a similar lifestyle in that I believe she lives with her aunt as well. And they're basically talking about having this idea of Aunt May basically coming and living with Anna basically, because Mary Jane has basically gotten her own apartment, so now Anna's alone, so she's trying to get Aunt May to basically tell Peter to get his own apartment and basically start moving on with his life and being more of a grown-up. So I really enjoyed that, and while that's happening, that conversation, we get to see that Peter's actually buying a motorcycle for himself to basically ride around and stuff. So that's really cool, and he actually gets a loan for J. Jonah Jameson, which was really interesting. Of course, J. Jonah Jameson has his own agendas basically and motivations for helping Peter with this loan, but it's a really nice scene, and I really do enjoy the relationship between Peter and J. Jonah Jameson in these early issues. So we get to see that J. Jonah Jameson's son, John, basically comes home from, I believe it's NASA. He's like an astronaut, and he basically tells his dad, about that something had happened in space. And we got a recap of what happened in Spider-Man issue 1, basically with Spider-Man saving John's life. And of course, Jonah Jameson doesn't believe that Spider-Man was doing this with good intentions, and kind of like puts his own spin on the rescue of J. Jonah Jameson's son, basically, John. But John basically tells him that something happened to him while he was in space. He got hit by some type of like radiation or something like that. And we'll see the effects of this in the next issue, but it's important to mention it here because it is going to be important for the next issue that we talk about. Now, after we get the explanation of what happened with John, basically this little tease of what we're going to see come to fruition in the next issue, we get to see the introduction of the Rhino in like this type of like desert environment. And yeah, so the Rhino basically goes to like this military place or something, and the guards basically try to shoot him with their guns, but the Rhino's hide, his outfit that's on him basically is bulletproof. So he basically just goes through the guards like nothing, and he crashes through the wall, basically destroying it in the process. Now we get to see Peter basically interacting with Betty Brant. Betty Brant comes back to town, and I think she's going to try working back at the Daily Bugle. So we'll probably see her in future issues. And we get to see that Ned Leeds basically arrives after Peter had went to take her for lunch or something, and Peter basically realizes that he's kind of moved on from Betty Brant, and that it's just kind of awkward between the two, so he lets Ned Leeds basically be able to interact with Betty and basically, continue his date with her. Basically, like, he lets him take over, and he goes off on his own, and he just realizes, Peter, as we see on the dialogue on the panels, that he basically has moved on from Betty, and that she's kind of like a whole different person, or just some girl to him now, rather than, his lover in that, or girlfriend. So that's pretty interesting. And while that's going on, you see that the Rhino is basically causing havoc in the city. So he's basically trying to search for John Jameson, and he finds him with his dad, J. Jonah Jameson, and Peter in his Spider-Man outfit basically arrives and sees that the Rhino has taken John as like a hostage, or he's trying to take John for some reason. So Peter basically goes and he goes after them, and him and the Rhino get into a confrontation, and they get into a fight, and we get a lot of really cool action panels. Eventually Spider-Man realizes that the Rhino is way more stronger than he is, so he's basically just playing dodging games with the Rhino and trying to wear him out. And eventually the Rhino does indeed wear himself out, but that's after Peter basically is fighting him and using his webbing to basically stop him. Of course, webbing doesn't work on really, really strong opponents, and the Rhino definitely is one of Peter's more stronger foes. So he basically gets out of it, but Peter does this move where he grabs the Rhino with his legs, like his head, and he basically slams it into the ground. Really cool. Yeah, really cool action panel. And when the Rhino gets back up, he basically is kind of like all worn out. It's implied that he weared himself out during the battle more than Spider-Man actually defeating him with that final blow. At least that's the way I took it. Maybe you can take it with that final blow basically had tired him completely and then knocked him out. Kind of like messed with his head for a bit, gave him like a concussion, but he basically is knocked out, and John is basically saved. J. Jonah Jameson basically wants the police to basically arrest, a Spider-Man as always, and basically tells them that he's gonna, charge him for slander or something like that. Which is really funny. They have a really funny interaction. But John is basically saved, and Peter basically leaves the crime scene, and yeah, that's it for the Rhino's first fight with Spider-Man. Now, John basically is, I guess, fine, and they're gonna head back home, him and J. Jonah Jameson. Peter gets on his motorcycle after he gets out of his Spider-Man outfit, and he has an interaction with Gwen Stacy, Harry Osborn, and Flash Thompson, and he basically tosses Gwen Stacy in a more confident manner, and it seems like they're setting up him having a relationship with Gwen Stacy in the future. So that's really cool, and we get to see more confidence from Peter, and Gwen not acting as stuck up as she was in previous issues. So I really like that, and everyone just seems to be maturing, which I really like that they're making this a gradual change with each issue. We're seeing them really develop more and more, and hopefully they all become friends in future issues. And yeah, so Peter basically impresses Gwen with his talk. She even makes an offhand remark to Flash saying that maybe he tosses Peter his confidence and way of talking will rub off on him, his intelligence will rub off on him. So that was really funny. But Peter goes and he goes to see Aunt May on his motorcycle, talking to Aunt Anna, and he basically wonders what they were talking about, but Aunt May tells him not to worry about it. So I'm guessing that it'll be a couple of issues until maybe Peter goes and gets his own apartment, and they bring back this plot point of Aunt May going to live with Aunt Anna, because I do think that's supposed to happen in the future. That's why that would be set up here, but it'll probably be it could be a good amount of issues until that happens. But I really did enjoy how this ends, and Aunt May and Peter basically, have a little bit of a talk, and Peter basically goes off on his motorcycle, and he's told by Aunt May that she wants him to meet Mary Jane Watson, and that should happen in the next issue. And Peter basically drives off, knowing about this dinner party that they're supposed to have, or dinner they're gonna have tomorrow night. And I think it's at their house, at the Watson's house, or I think it's at Peter and Aunt May's house. So we'll see Mary Jane in the next issue with her Aunt Anna, and it should be really fun. I believe Aunt Anna is in it. But at the end, the final panel basically shows Peter wondering if it'd be funny if Mary Jane looks like a doll, she looks like a model. And we'll see that in the next issue. And that's how the issue ends. But, what Peter basically saying that with his type of luck, that should be impossible. But we all know how Mary Jane looks. And he definitely is going to get surprised in the next issue. But that's how the issue ends. And yeah, that was the Amazing Spider-Man issue 41, The Horns of the Rhino. Very good, solid issue. I really enjoyed it. I didn't think it was going to be as good as it was. Considering that John Romita had just gotten on the book a few issues ago, I believe it was 2 issues ago. I didn't expect the writing and the art to be so good and work so well together, but it really does, and I'm really hyped to be covering this run, and now I can see definitely where the hype comes from with the John Romita Sr. run. It really is fantastic, and I can't wait for you guys to check out the next few issues, because they're amazing as well. But that's going to be all, guys. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe. We covered the Amazing Spider-Man series. We're covering the entire series so far, up to this point, and we're just going to keep continuing on as long as these videos are doing good. So we're going to try covering the whole John Romita Sr. era, and then we're going to see if we're going to continue after that, if the video series does well. And, the Amazing Spider-Man is just a very good comic, and it's really fun to talk about each issue with you guys as we go along the Amazing Spider-Man story. But that's going to be all, guys. Until next video, God bless you. Until next lesson, keep on reading those comics.